In the heart of Silicon Valley, where dreams of technological grandeur mingled with the scent of money, stood the Blackwood Mansion, a monument to excess. Its gleaming white facade and manicured lawns seemed to mock the very notion of modesty. This was the home of the Blackwood family, titans of the tech industry and darlings of social media, their lives a carefully curated exhibition of wealth and success. Jonathan Blackwood, the patriarch, was a man whose very presence commanded attention. At 45, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never known failure. His salt and pepper hair and piercing blue eyes gave him an air of distinguished authority, while his tailor-made suits whispered of old money and new power. As the CEO of Black Tech, a company that had revolutionized artificial intelligence, Jonathan was used to making headlines and breaking records. His wife, Vivian Blackwood, was the perfect complement to his ambition. At 38, she was a vision of refined beauty, her honey blonde hair and emerald eyes a stark contrast to her husband's darker features. Vivian had traded in her promising career as a neurosurgeon for the role of Silicon Valley's most envied socialite. Her days were filled with charity galas, exclusive spa treatments, and meticulously planned social media posts that showcased their picture-perfect life. The Blackwood children, 14-year-old twins Ethan and Emma, were the apples of their parents' eyes, or so it seemed to the outside world. Ethan, a budding tech prodigy, spent his days coding and dreaming of following in his father's footsteps. Emma, on the other hand, was a gifted musician, her violin performances the talk of their elite private school. Both children were groomed from birth to be the heirs to the Blackwood legacy. Their childhood a rigorous schedule of advanced classes, private tutors, and carefully selected extracurricular activities. But behind the facade of perfection, cracks were beginning to show. Jonathan's obsession with work meant he was rarely home, and when he was, his mind was elsewhere. Vivian's smile, so dazzling in her Instagram posts, rarely reached her eyes in the privacy of their home. The twins, for all their accomplishments, felt the weight of expectation crushing their young shoulders. Enter Maria Hernandez, the Blackwood family's maid of 5 years. At 32, Maria was a stark contrast to the family she served. Her warm brown eyes and gentle smile spoke of a kindness that money couldn't buy. She moved through the mansion with quiet efficiency, her presence both essential and invisible to its inhabitants. Maria had come to America from Mexico a decade ago, leaving behind a life of poverty in search of opportunity. She'd worked tirelessly, sending money back home to support her aging parents and younger siblings. The job with the Blackwoods was a godsend. The pay was excellent, and it allowed her to live in the small guest house on the property. But working for the Blackwoods was no easy task. Vivian's exacting standards meant that Maria was constantly on her toes, ensuring that every surface gleamed and every item was in its proper place. The twins, while polite, treated her with the casual indifference of those who had never known want. And Jonathan. Well, Jonathan barely seemed to notice her existence at all. Despite the challenges, Maria took pride in her work. She found a quiet satisfaction in bringing order to the chaos that lurked beneath the Blackwood's perfect exterior. And more than that, she felt a deep, unspoken connection to the family she served. She saw the loneliness in Vivian's eyes, the pressure weighing on the twins' shoulders, the desperation in Jonathan's ever more frantic pursuit of success. But Maria's days fell into a familiar routine. She would rise before dawn, preparing breakfast for the family before they rushed off to their respective obligations. As the house emptied, she would begin her rounds, dusting, vacuuming, and polishing until every inch of the mansion sparkled. That IT was on one such morning. As Maria was tidying Jonathan's home office, that she overheard a conversation that would change everything. Jonathan was on a video call, his voice uncharacteristically hushed and urgent. "Listen, we need to move the timeline up," he was saying, his eyes darting nervously to the door where Maria stood frozen. "The prototype isn't ready, I know, but we don't have a choice. If we don't announce at the conference next month, we're finished. Our stock is already taking a hit, and the board is breathing down my neck." There was a pause as Jonathan listened to the person on the other end of the call. His face grew increasingly pale. "No, you don't understand," he hissed. "It's not just the company at stake here. It's everything. The house, the kids' trust funds. Hell, even the clothes on our backs. I've leveraged it all on this project. If it fails, we lose everything. Maria's heart raced as she processed what she'd just heard. The Blackwoods, this family that seemed to have it all, were standing on the edge of ruin. And they didn't even know it why as the days passed. Maria watched the family with new eyes. She noticed the growing tension in Jonathan's shoulders, the way Vivian's hands shook as she applied her makeup each morning. The twins, usually so focused on their respective passions, began to pick up on the stress permeating the household. Ethan's coding sessions grew longer and more frantic, while Emma's violin practice took on a desperate, almost manic quality. Maria longed to offer comfort, to tell them that material things weren't everything, that they would survive even if the worst came to pass. But she knew her place. She was the maid, invisible and voiceless in their world of privilege and power. Then came the day that would shatter the illusion of the Blackwoods' perfect life forever. Maria was in the kitchen, preparing lunch, when she heard a commotion from upstairs. Vivian's voice, usually so controlled, was raised in panic. Jonathan, where are you? Something's wrong with the baby." Maria froze. Baby? What baby? In all her years working for the Blackwoods, she had never seen or heard any mention of a baby. She rushed upstairs, her heart pounding in her chest. The scene that greeted her in the master bedroom was one of chaos. Vivian was hunched over a bassinet that Maria had never seen before, her perfectly manicured hands clutching its sides so tightly her knuckles were white. Jonathan stood a few feet away, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. "He's not breathing," Vivian sobbed, her composure completely shattered. "Jonathan, do something." Maria didn't hesitate. She rushed to the bassinet, gently but firmly moving Vivian aside. Inside lay a tiny infant, no more than a few weeks old, its skin an alarming shade of blue. With the calm efficiency born of years of caring for her younger siblings, Maria began CPR, her movements sure and practiced. Time seemed to stretch into eternity as Maria worked to revive the baby. Jonathan and Vivian stood frozen, watching in helpless horror. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the baby let out a weak cry. The room collectively exhaled. Vivian collapsed to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Jonathan stumbled backward until he hit the wall, sliding down to sit on the floor with his head in his hands. Maria, cradling the now crying infant, looked between the two of them, 1,000 questions racing through her mind. How long had they been hiding this baby? Why had they kept it a secret? And most importantly, what kind of desperation would drive them to such extremes? As if reading her thoughts, Vivian spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. We couldn't." She trailed off, unable to continue. Jonathan picked up where his wife left off, his voice hollow. "The company, it's everything. We're on the brink of a breakthrough that could change the world. But if word got out that we had a baby now, that I might be distracted." He shook his head. "We thought we could handle it. Keep him a secret until after the product launch. But we're in over our heads." Maria looked down at the infant in her arms, then back at the broken figures of Jonathan and Vivian Blackwood. In that moment, she realized that for all their wealth and status, they were just as lost and scared as anyone else. Perhaps even more so, because they had so much further to fall. She made a decision then, one that would alter the course of all their lives. Senora Blackwood, she said, her voice gentle but firm. "This cannot continue. This baby, he needs care, love, attention. He needs his parents." Vivian looked up, her mascara streaked down her cheeks. "But the company," Maria shook her head. "With all due respect, Senora, no company is worth the life of a child. No amount of money or success can replace these precious moments." For a long moment, silence reigned in the room. Then, to Maria's surprise, Jonathan let out a ragged laugh. "You know," he said, running a hand through his disheveled hair, "I've been so focused on changing the world with our AI. I forgot that the most important change was right here in front of me." He stood up, walking over to Maria and gently taking the baby from her arms. He looked down at his son's face, really looked perhaps for the first time. "You're right, Maria. It's time we faced reality. The company, the money, it all means nothing if we lose our humanity in the process." Vivian joined them, wrapping her arms around her husband and child. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain. Maria smiled, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. "Now, Senora, we take care of this beautiful baby. Together. And then we face whatever comes next. As a family." As she watched the Blackwoods embrace, their faces a mix of fear and hope, Maria felt a sense of purpose wash over her. She had come to this country seeking opportunity, but she had found something far more valuable: the chance to make a real difference in the lives of others. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be scandal when the Blackwoods revealed their secret, challenges as they learned to balance their ambitions with their new role as parents, and undoubtedly many sleepless nights as they cared for their infant son. But as Maria looked at the tableau before her, the mighty Blackwoods brought low by the simple, overwhelming love for their child, she knew that this was just the beginning of a new, more authentic chapter in all their lives. The mansion around them still gleamed with wealth and privilege, but the real treasure was here in this room, a family finding its way back to what truly mattered. And Maria, the quiet, invisible maid, had been the catalyst for this transformation. As she quietly slipped out of the room to give the family their privacy, she felt a warmth in her heart that no amount of money could ever buy. Little did she know, this was just the first tremor in a seismic shift that would rock the foundations of the Blackwood Empire, testing loyalties, challenging long-held beliefs, and ultimately redefining what it meant to be truly rich. The story of the Blackwoods and their maid was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning to unfold in ways none of them could have ever imagined. #the abyss of desperation. A family's darkest hour. The days following Maria's discovery of the Blackwoods' secret baby were a whirlwind of change. Jonathan and Vivian, shaken by their near tragedy and Maria's words, had made a public announcement about their newborn son, Christopher. The tech world was abuzz with speculation and gossip, but the Blackwoods stood firm in their decision to prioritize their family. However, the ripple effects of their revelation were swift and merciless. Black Tech's stock plummeted as investors questioned Jonathan's commitment to the company. The board of directors called emergency meetings, and rumors of a potential ousting of Jonathan as CEO began to circulate. Meanwhile, within the walls of the Blackwood mansion, a different kind of storm was brewing. Vivian, who had always prided herself on her poise and control, found herself overwhelmed by the demands of motherhood. The sleepless nights and constant needs of baby Christopher left her irritable and on edge. Her carefully curated social media presence began to slip, and the cracks in her perfect image widened. Jonathan, torn between his family responsibilities and the desperate need to save his company, became a ghost in his own home. He would disappear into his home office for days on end, emerging only for hurried meals and brief, distracted interactions with his family. The twins, Ethan and Emma, watched this transformation with growing unease. Their once predictable world had been turned upside down by the arrival of their baby brother and the subsequent chaos that followed. Ethan retreated further into his coding projects, while Emma's music took on a somber, almost mournful quality. Maria, for her part, found herself increasingly caught in the middle. She had become a lifeline for the family, her steady presence a balm in the tumultuous household. She cared for Christopher when Vivian was overwhelmed, cooked meals that often went uneaten by the distracted Jonathan, and tried to provide some semblance of normalcy for the twins. But as the weeks wore on, Maria began to notice a disturbing change in Vivian's behavior. The new mother, once so image-conscious and put together, now spent hours staring blankly at the wall, Christopher wailing unattended in his bassinet. There were times when Maria would enter a room to find Vivian holding the baby with a look of utter bewilderment, as if she couldn't quite remember how he had gotten there. One particularly tense evening, Maria overheard a heated argument between Jonathan and Vivian. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but their voices carried through the thin walls of the nursery where she was changing Christopher. "We can't go on like this, Jonathan," Vivian hissed, her voice raw with exhaustion and frustration. "The company is tanking, The press won't leave us alone, and I can't do this anymore. I'm not cut out for this motherhood thing." Jonathan's reply was sharp and bitter. "What do you want me to do, Viv? Wave a magic wand and make it all go away? I'm fighting for our future here. Our future." Vivian let out a hollow laugh. "What future? We're drowning, Jonathan. Maybe we made a mistake. Maybe we're not meant to be parents." The silence that followed was deafening. Maria held her breath, cradling Christopher close to her chest. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Surely they didn't mean. Jonathan's voice, when he finally spoke, was low and dangerous. "Don't say that. Don't you ever say that. He's our son. Is he?" Vivian's voice cracked. "Or is he just another project we've failed at?" The sound of a door slamming ended the conversation, leaving Maria shaken to her core. She looked down at Christopher, peaceful in his innocence, unaware of the turmoil surrounding him. In that moment, she made a silent vow to protect this child, no matter the cost. The next few days passed in a haze of tension. Jonathan was rarely seen, locked away in his office on endless conference calls. Vivian oscillated between manic bursts of energy, redecorating rooms, planning elaborate meals that never materialized, and periods of catatonic withdrawal. Maria did her best to shield the children from the worst of it. She encouraged Ethan and Emma to focus on their passions, praising Ethan's latest coding breakthrough and attending Emma's solo violin recital. She cared for Christopher with a fierce devotion, determined to provide the love and stability his parents seemed incapable of giving. But even Maria had her limits. The strain of holding the family together was taking its toll, and she found herself lying awake at night, worried about what the future held for the Blackwoods. And for herself, that IT was on one such sleepless night that Maria's worst fears came to pass. She was jolted awake by the sound of a car engine roaring to life. Glancing at the clock, 3:27 a.m., she felt a chill run down her spine. Something was wrong. Maria threw on a robe and rushed out of the guest house, her heart pounding. As she approached the main house, she saw the taillights of Vivian's luxury SUV disappearing down the long driveway. Panic seized her as she raced into the house. She took the stairs two at a time, praying she was overreacting. But as she burst into the nursery, her worst fears were confirmed. The room was in disarray, drawers pulled open, clothes strewn about. And Christopher's crib was empty. For a moment, Maria stood frozen in disbelief. Then, survival instincts honed by years of hardship kicked in. She ran to Jonathan's room, pounding on the door. "Senor Blackwood! Senor Blackwood! Wake up! It's Christopher! He's gone!" Jonathan opened the door, bleary-eyed and confused. "What? Maria, what are you talking about?" "Senora Vivian." Maria gasped, fighting to catch her breath. "She's taken Christopher. They're gone." The news hit Jonathan like a physical blow. He staggered back, his face draining of color. Then, in a burst of frantic energy, he grabbed his phone, dialing Vivian's number with trembling fingers. "Straight to voicemail," he muttered, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "This can't be happening." She couldn't, but deep down, they both knew the truth. The strain had finally broken Vivian, pushing her to an unthinkable act. What followed was a night of desperate phone calls and agonizing waiting. Jonathan alerted the police. Using every connection, he had to escalate the search. Maria comforted the twins, who had been awakened by the commotion, trying to shield them from the full horror of what was unfolding the day as dawn broke, casting a pale light over the mansion. There was still no word from Vivian. Jonathan paced the living room like a caged animal, alternating between rage and despair. Maria sat quietly, Christopher's favorite stuffed animal clutched to her chest, praying for a miracle that IT was just past noon when the call came in. Jonathan answered, his whole body tense. Maria watched as a series of emotions played across his face. Relief, confusion, and then horror that he ended the call and turned to Maria, his eyes haunted. "They found Vivian's car," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It was parked behind a shopping center in Oakland. They found Christopher in a dumpster behind the building." Maria felt the world tilt on its axis. "Dios mío," she breathed. He's alive," Jonathan said quickly. Someone heard him crying and called 911. He's at the hospital now. But Vivian, she's gone. They don't know where she is. The next few hours passed in a blur. Jonathan rushed to the hospital while Maria stayed behind with the twins, trying to explain the unexplainable to two teenagers whose world had just been shattered. It wasn't until late that night, after Christopher had been examined and deemed miraculously unharmed, that the full story came to light. Vivian, in a state of postpartum psychosis exacerbated by the stress of their public scrutiny, had convinced herself that Christopher was the source of all their problems. In her distorted reality, removing him from their lives would solve everything. She had driven for hours, Christopher in the back seat, wrestling with her demons. In a moment of clarity, she had realized the horror of what she was contemplating. Unable to face what she had almost done, but also unable to return home, she had made the desperate decision to leave Christopher where he would quickly be found, then disappeared into the night. As Jonathan recounted this to Maria, cradling a sleeping Christopher in his arms. The weight of their new reality settled over them. Their perfect life, their carefully constructed image, had been irreparably shattered. But out of the wreckage, a new truth emerged. The superficial trappings of success meant nothing compared to the precious life they had almost lost. "I've been such a fool," Jonathan said softly, gazing down at his son. "Chasing after wealth and status, thinking that's what would make us happy. But this is what matters. I almost lost everything that truly counts because I couldn't see what was right in front of me." Maria nodded, her heart aching for this broken family. "It's not too late, Senor Blackwood," she said gently. "Christopher is safe. And now you have a chance to rebuild, to be the father he needs, the father all your children need." Jonathan looked up at her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I don't know if I can do this, Maria. I don't know how to be just a dad." Maria smiled, reaching out to squeeze his hand. "You don't have to know everything right away. You just have to be present. Be there for them. Love them. The rest will come." As they sat there in the quiet hospital room, the first tentative rays of dawn began to peek through the windows. It was a new day, the beginning of a long and challenging journey. The road ahead would be fraught with obstacles, legal battles, public scrutiny, the monumental task of healing their fractured family. The search for Vivian would continue, a shadow hanging over their lives. But in that moment, watching Jonathan hold his son with a mixture of fear and fierce love, Maria felt a glimmer of hope. The Blackwoods had been brought to their knees, stripped of their gilded facade. Yet in losing everything they thought they wanted, they had found what they truly needed. A.S. Christopher stirred in his sleep. Letting out a tiny sigh, Maria made a silent vow. She would stand by this family, not as a maid, but as a pillar of strength. She would help them navigate the choppy waters ahead, guiding them toward a future built on love, authenticity, and the true meaning of family. The Blackwood saga was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning. The world that had once worshipped them for their wealth and success would now watch with morbid fascination as they grappled with this all-too-human tragedy. Every step of their journey would be scrutinized, judged, and dissected in the court of public opinion. But as Maria looked at Jonathan, seeing the determination slowly replacing the despair in his eyes, she knew that they would weather this storm. It would not be easy, and there would be days when the weight of their past mistakes threatened to crush them. But they had each other, and they had a second chance, a precious opportunity to redefine what it meant to be truly rich. That as the hospital began to stir with the activity of a new day, Maria stood up, smoothing down her rumpled clothes. There was work to be done, the twins to comfort, a home to put in order, a future to start planning. But for now, she allowed herself a moment to simply be present, to bear witness to this fragile new beginning. Jonathan looked up at her, a question in his eyes. Maria nodded, a silent communication passing between them. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The maid and the millionaire, bound by circumstances neither could have imagined, united in their commitment to healing this wounded family. As Maria left the room to make the necessary calls and arrangements, she paused at the door, looking back at Jonathan and Christopher. The sight of the once mighty so cradling his infant son murmuring soft promises of love and protection, stirred something deep within her. This, she realized, was true wealth. Not the mansions or the stock options or the social media fame, but this raw, vulnerable love. The kind of riches that couldn't be measured in dollars and cents, but in the quiet breaths of a sleeping baby and the trembling hands of a father vowing to do better. Maria stepped out into the hospital corridor, squaring her shoulders. The journey ahead would be long and difficult, but she was ready. Ready to help the Blackwoods rebuild, to show them that sometimes it takes losing everything to find what truly matters. That as she walked towards the hospital exit, her mind already racing with plans and preparations, Maria allowed herself a small smile. The headlines would be sensational, the gossip vicious. But behind closed doors, away from the prying eyes of the world, a quiet revolution was taking place. A family was being reborn, stripped of pretense, and forced to confront the raw truth of their relationships. And Maria, the once invisible maid, now stood at the center of this transformation. She had become the unlikely hero of the Blackwood saga, the steady hand guiding them from the brink of disaster towards a future filled with hope. The sun was fully up now, bathing the world in the golden light of a new day. As Maria stepped outside, feeling the warmth on her face, she took a deep breath. The air felt different somehow, cleaner, full of possibility. The story of the Blackwoods and their maid was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning to unfold in ways none of them could have ever imagined. But one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. #echoes of compassion. The maid's unwavering resolve. The days following Christopher's rescue from the dumpster were a blur of activity and emotion. The Blackwood mansion, once a symbol of opulence and success, now stood as a silent witness to the family's unraveling. The manicured lawns and gleaming windows seemed to mock the chaos that reigned within its walls. At the center of this storm stood Maria Hernandez, the maid whose quick thinking and unwavering dedication had played a crucial role in saving Christopher's life. As dawn broke on the third day since the incident, Maria found herself standing in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long since gone cold. The events of the past 72 hours played on a loop in her mind. The frantic search, the agonizing wait, the moment of horrified relief when Christopher was found alive. But it was the aftermath that truly tested Maria's strength and resolve. Jonathan Blackwood, once the epitome of corporate success, was a shell of his former self. He moved through the house like a ghost, his eyes haunted, his posture slumped under the weight of guilt and shock. The twins, Ethan and Emma, oscillated between stunned silence and outbursts of anger and confusion. And baby Christopher, blissfully unaware of the turmoil surrounding him, required constant care and attention that his traumatized family struggled to provide. That it was in this moment of crisis that Maria made a decision that would change all their lives forever. Setting down her untouched coffee, she squared her shoulders and made her way to Jonathan's study. She found him slumped over his desk, surrounded by newspapers blaring sensational headlines about the Blackwood family's fall from grace. Without a word, Maria crossed the room and pulled open the heavy curtains, letting the morning sunlight stream in. Jonathan blinked in the sudden brightness, looking up at Maria with bleary, bloodshot eyes. "Maria? What time is it?" "It's time to wake up, Senor Blackwood," Maria said, her voice gentle but firm. "Your children need you." Jonathan's face crumpled. I can't. How am I supposed to face them? After everything that's happened?" Maria took a deep breath, steeling herself for what she was about to say. "With all due respect, Senor Blackwood, you don't have a choice. Your family is in crisis. Your children are scared and confused. And Christopher needs his father." She paused, watching Jonathan's face carefully. When he didn't respond, she continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I know you're hurting. I know you're scared. But right now, you need to be the father your children deserve. The father I know you can be." Jonathan looked up at her, his eyes wide with surprise and a flicker of something else. Hope, perhaps, or determination. "But how, Maria? How do I even begin to fix this mess?" Maria's expression softened. "You start by showing up, Senor Blackwood. You start by being present. The rest we'll figure out together." In that moment, something shifted between them. The barriers of class and position that had always defined their relationship seemed to dissolve, replaced by a shared purpose and mutual respect. Jonathan stood up slowly, as if the weight of the world was on his shoulders. "Together?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Maria nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Together. You're not alone in this, Senior Blackwood. I'm here to help in whatever way I can." And so began a new chapter in the Blackwood saga, one that would challenge everything they thought they knew about family, loyalty, and the true meaning of wealth. The first order of business was addressing the immediate needs of the children. Maria organized a family meeting, gently but firmly insisting that everyone attend. In the sunlit living room, with Christopher cradled in her arms, she facilitated a conversation that was long overdue. Ethan and Emma, initially sullen and withdrawn, gradually opened up under Maria's patient guidance. They expressed their fear, their anger, their confusion about their mother's actions, and their father's seeming inability to cope. Jonathan, for his part, listened with growing horror as his children poured out their hearts. He realized, perhaps for the first time, how his single-minded pursuit of success had affected his family. I had no idea," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I thought I was providing for you, giving you the best of everything. But I see now, I've failed you in the ways that matter most." Emma, her eyes brimming with tears, reached out and took her father's hand. "We don't need the best of everything, Dad. We just need you." It was a turning point as the family talked, cried, and began the slow process of healing. Maria watched with a mixture of pride and determination. She knew this was just the beginning, that there would be many challenges ahead, but she was committed to seeing them through. Over the next few weeks, Maria's role in the Blackwood household evolved far beyond that of a maid. She became a confidant, a counselor, and a pillar of strength for the entire family. For Jonathan, she was a grounding presence, helping him navigate the treacherous waters of single parenthood while dealing with the fallout from Vivian's actions and the implosion of his company. "I don't know how to do this, Maria," he confessed one evening after a particularly trying day of meetings with lawyers and PR specialists. "I've always known how to close a deal, how to outmaneuver a competitor. But this, being a full-time parent rebuilding our lives, I feel so lost." Maria, who was folding laundry nearby, paused in her work. "Senor Blackwood," she said gently, "being a parent isn't about knowing all the answers. It's about being there, about trying your best every day. And from what I've seen, you're doing just that." Her words seemed to lift a weight from Jonathan's shoulders. He looked at her with newfound respect and gratitude. "Thank you, Maria. Not just for the words, but for everything you've done for us. I don't know where we'd be without you." For the twins, Maria became a source of stability and understanding. She listened to their fears and frustrations, offering wisdom born from her own experiences of hardship and resilience. One afternoon, she found Emma sitting alone in the garden, her violin untouched beside her. "Your music has been quiet lately," Maria observed, sitting down next to the teenager. Emma shrugged, picking at a loose thread on her jeans. "What's the point? Everything's different now. Nothing feels right anymore." Maria was quiet for a moment, considering her words carefully. "You know, Emma, when I first came to this country, I felt the same way. Everything was different, nothing felt right. But I found that music, the songs from my homeland, helped me feel connected to who I was, even as everything around me changed." She gently picked up the violin, offering it to Emma. "Your music is a part of you, Mija. It can be a way to express what you're feeling, to make sense of the chaos. Why don't you play something? Anything at all?" Hesitantly, Emma took the violin. As she began to play, her tentative notes grew stronger, more confident. The melody that emerged was haunting and beautiful, filled with all the pain and hope of their current situation. When she finished, Emma was crying, but there was a lightness to her that Maria hadn't seen in weeks. "Thank you," Emma whispered, hugging her violin close. Maria smiled, brushing a tear from her own cheek. "No, thank you for sharing that beautiful music. You have a gift, Emma. Don't let the hardships of life silence it." For Ethan, Maria's influence was more subtle, but no less profound. She encouraged his interest in coding, seeing it as not just a potential career path, but as a way for him to process his emotions and make sense of the world. "You know, Ethan," she said one day, as she watched him hunched over his computer, "your father tells me you're working on an AI program that can recognize emotions in text. That's very impressive." Ethan looked up, surprised by her interest. "Yeah, it's just a project I've been tinkering with. Not sure if it'll amount to anything." Maria sat down next to him, her eyes twinkling. "I think it could amount to a great deal. Imagine if you could use that technology to help people understand each other better, to bridge the gaps in communication that cause so much pain in this world." Ethan's eyes widened as he considered the possibilities. I never thought of it that way. Do you really think something like that could make a difference?" Maria nodded solemnly. "Ethan, I believe that technology, when used with compassion and understanding, has the power to change the world. And from what I've seen of your skills and your heart, I think you could be the one to make that happen." From that day on, Ethan attacked his coding projects with renewed vigor, his work infused with a sense of purpose that had been lacking before. But it was with baby Christopher that Maria's impact was perhaps most profound. In the absence of Vivian, and with Jonathan still finding his footing as a single father, Maria became Christopher's primary caregiver. She sang to him in Spanish, ancient lullabies that had been passed down through generations of her family. She told him stories of her childhood in Mexico, of the strength and resilience of his family, of the bright future that lay ahead of him despite the difficult circumstances of his early days. One night, as Maria was putting Christopher to bed, Jonathan appeared in the doorway of the nursery. He watched silently as Maria went through their nightly routine. The soft singing, the gentle rocking, the whispered words of love and encouragement. As she laid the sleeping baby in his crib, Jonathan spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "He loves you, you know. We all do." Maria turned, startled by his presence and his words. "Señor Blackwood, Jonathan held up a hand, stopping her. "Please, Maria. After everything we've been through, I think you can call me Jonathan." He stepped into the room, his eyes never leaving her face. "I've been thinking a lot lately about family, about what it really means, and I've realized that family isn't just about blood. It's about love, about being there for each other through the good times and the bad." He took a deep breath, as if steeling himself for what he was about to say. "Maria, you've been more than just an employee to us. You've been our rock, our guide, our family. And I was wondering, hoping really, if you'd consider making it official." Maria's heart skipped a beat. "Official?" she asked, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. Jonathan nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I'd like to offer you a permanent position in our family, not as a maid, but as a guardian for the children. A co-parent, if you will, with full legal rights and responsibilities." Maria felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Jonathan, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," came a voice from the doorway. They turned to see Ethan and Emma standing there, hope shining in their eyes. "Please, Maria," Emma added. "We need you. We all do." In that moment, looking at the faces of the people who had come to mean so much to her, Maria knew there was only one answer she could give. "Yes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, I would be honored to be a part of this family." The joy that filled the room in that moment was palpable. As they gathered in a group hug, careful not to wake the sleeping Christopher, Maria felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. She thought back to the day she had first come to work for the Blackwoods, how intimidated she had been by their wealth and status. She could never have imagined then that she would one day be standing here, accepted as an equal, as family. But as she looked around at the faces of Jonathan, Ethan, Emma, and baby Christopher, she realized that this was where she belonged. This was her family, bound not by blood, but by love, by shared experiences, by a commitment to stand by each other through whatever challenges lay ahead. The road forward would not be easy. There would be legal hurdles to overcome, public opinion to contend with, and the ongoing search for Vivian to deal with. The family would need to rebuild their lives, redefine their priorities, and learn to navigate their new reality. But as Maria stood there, Surrounded by the warmth of her newfound family, she felt a sense of hope and determination. Whatever came their way, they would face it together. And in doing so, they would redefine what it truly meant to be rich. As the night settled around them, the Blackwood Mansion, once a symbol of material wealth and social status, took on a new significance. It became a haven, a place of healing and new beginnings. And at its heart stood Maria, the maid whose compassion and strength had transformed not just a family, but the very definition of what family could be. The story of the Blackwoods and their maid was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But one thing was certain. It was a story of hope, of redemption, and of the transformative power of love. As Maria tucked the last of the children into bed that night, she paused at the window, looking out at the star-studded sky. She thought of her own family back in Mexico, of the journey that had brought her here, of the twists and turns of fate that had led to this moment that a shooting star streaked across the heavens. And Maria made a silent wish. Not for wealth or fame or any of the things she once thought defined success. No, she wished for strength. Strength to guide this family through the challenges ahead. Strength to love them unconditionally. Strength to help them become the best versions of themselves. As she turned away from the window, Maria caught sight of her reflection. The woman looking back at her was not just a maid, not just an employee. She was a guardian, a mentor, a mother figure. She was the heart of a family that had been reborn from the ashes of tragedy. With a small smile, Maria switched off the light and headed to her own room. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities for growth and healing. But whatever came their way, she knew they would face it together. The Blackwood family saga continued, with Maria at its center, a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of the human spirit, and the endless possibilities that arise when love transcends all boundaries. #Rebirth. The dawn of a new legacy. The months following Maria's official integration into the Blackwood family were a whirlwind of change, challenges, and unexpected triumphs. The mansion that had once been a symbol of material excess gradually transformed into a warm, vibrant home filled with laughter, tears, and the messy, beautiful reality of a family healing together. Jonathan Blackwood, once the titan of Silicon Valley, found himself navigating a new world. One where board meetings and profit margins took a backseat to school runs and bedtime stories. The transition wasn't easy. There were days when the weight of his past mistakes and the uncertain future threatened to overwhelm him. One particularly challenging morning, as Jonathan struggled to prepare breakfast for the children, a task that would have been unthinkable in his previous life. He felt the familiar panic rising in his chest. The eggs were burning, Christopher was crying, and the twins were bickering over the last piece of toast. "I can't do this," he muttered, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I'm not cut out for this." It was then that he felt a gentle hand on his shoulder. Maria stood beside him, her eyes filled with understanding and encouragement. "You can do this, Jonathan," she said softly. "And you don't have to do it alone. Remember, we're in this together." With Maria's help, the chaos of the morning slowly transformed into a new kind of routine. As they worked side by side, flipping pancakes and soothing Christopher, Jonathan felt a sense of purpose that had been missing from his life for far too long. "You know," he said, as they finally sat down to eat, "I used to think success was all about the bottom line. But this being here, doing this, it feels more real, more important than any deal I ever closed." Maria smiled, a knowing glint in her eye. "That's because it is, Jonathan. This is what truly matters." As the days passed, Jonathan threw himself into his new role as a hands-on father with the same dedication he had once reserved for his business empire. He attended parent-teacher conferences, coached Ethan's coding club, and never missed one of Emma's violin recitals. The change in him was profound. The hard edges of the corporate warrior softened, replaced by the patient understanding of a father learning alongside his children. His smile, once rare and reserved for business victories, became a frequent sight, lighting up his face as he shared in his family's joys and supported them through their struggles. But it wasn't just Jonathan who was transforming. The entire Blackwood family was undergoing a metamorphosis, guided by Maria's unwavering love and support. Ethan, inspired by his conversations with Maria about the potential of technology to make a difference, poured his energy into developing his emotional recognition AI. What had started as a hobby project began to attract attention from tech circles, not for its potential profit margins, but for its innovative approach to fostering empathy and understanding. One evening, as Ethan excitedly shared the latest breakthrough in his project, Jonathan listened with growing amazement. "You know, son," he said, his voice filled with pride, "what you're doing here, it's revolutionary. It's not just about making money or beating the competition. It's about making the world a better place." Ethan beamed, his eyes shining with a mix of pride and determination. "That's the goal, Dad. I want to create something that helps people connect, that bridges the gaps between us, like Maria's been doing for our family." Jonathan nodded, a lump forming in his throat. He realized that his son had grasped a fundamental truth that had eluded him for most of his life. The true measure of success lay not in personal gain, but in the positive impact one could have on others. Emma, too, was blossoming under the new family dynamic. Her music, once a source of pressure and a means to impress, became a channel for emotional expression and healing. She began composing her own pieces, haunting melodies that spoke of loss, hope, and resilience. One afternoon, Maria found Emma in the music room, surrounded by sheets of handwritten music. The teenager looked up, her face alight with excitement. "Maria, I think I've finally got it," she said, gesturing to the piano. "Will you listen?" As Emma began to play, Maria felt tears welling up in her eyes. The music was beautiful, yes, but it was more than that. It was honest, raw, filled with all the complex emotions of their family's journey. When the last note faded away, Maria pulled Emma into a tight hug. "Oh, Mija," she whispered, "that was incredible. You found your voice." Emma hugged her back fiercely. "I couldn't have done it without you, Maria. You taught me that it's okay to feel, to be vulnerable. That's what makes the music real." As for little Christopher, he grew from a helpless infant into a curious, joyful toddler, blissfully unaware of the tumultuous circumstances of his early days. His first words, first steps, and first mischievous grin were celebrated with a fervor that would have been unimaginable in the old Blackwood household. That it was Christopher who, in his innocent way, often brought the family's transformation into sharp focus. One sunny afternoon, as they all sat in the garden watching him toddle around, chasing butterflies and giggling with pure delight, Jonathan turned to Maria with tears in his eyes. "I almost lost this," he said softly. "If it weren't for you, Maria, I might never have known this happiness, this love. How can I ever thank you enough?" Maria shook her head, her own eyes glistening. "You don't need to thank me, Jonathan. This family, this love, it's a gift we all share. We've all played a part in healing each other." As idyllic as their new life seemed, it wasn't without its challenges. The outside world was not quick to forget the scandal that had rocked the Blackwood family. Paparazzi still lurked at the edges of their property, hoping to catch a glimpse of the fallen tech mogul and his unconventional family. Gossip columns speculated wildly about the nature of Jonathan and Maria's relationship, their headlines ranging from scandalous to saccharine. The legal battles, too, were far from over. Jonathan fought to retain control of his company, arguing that his newfound perspective made him a better leader than ever before. The search for Vivian continued, a constant undercurrent of worry in their lives. But through it all, the family stood united. They faced each challenge together, drawing strength from their bond and the unwavering support of Maria. That it was during one particularly difficult week, as they dealt with a fresh round of negative press and a setback in the search for Vivian, that Maria decided it was time for a family meeting. She gathered everyone in the living room, Christopher playing contentedly at her feet. "I know things have been tough lately," she began, looking around at the faces of the people who had become her family. "But I want you all to remember something important. Our strength doesn't come from what the world thinks of us, or from the money in our bank accounts. It comes from here." She placed a hand over her heart. "We've been through so much together," she continued. "We've faced loss, scandal, and heartbreak. But look at us now. Look at how far we've come." She turned to Jonathan. "You've become the father your children always needed. the leader your company truly deserves. To Ethan, she said, "You're using your brilliant mind to create technology that will help people understand each other better. That's a kind of wealth that can't be measured in dollars." To Emma, "Your music touches hearts and heals souls. You found a way to turn pain into beauty." Finally, she looked down at Christopher, who was now reaching up to her with a toothy grin. "And you, my little one, you remind us every day of the joy and wonder in this world." Maria's eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she looked back up at her family. "We may not be perfect. We may not fit the world's idea of what a family should be. But we are rich in the ways that truly matter. We have love, we have each other, and we have the strength to face whatever comes our way." The room was silent for a moment as her words sank in. Then, one by one, they came together in a group hug, Christopher giggling as he was swept up in the middle. As they held each other close, each member of the Blackwood family felt a sense of peace and belonging that no amount of money could ever be. In the years that followed, the Blackwood family continued to evolve and grow. Jonathan, with Maria by his side, steered his company in a new direction, focusing on socially responsible technologies that prioritized human connection and understanding. Ethan's emotional recognition AI became a cornerstone of this new approach, revolutionizing everything from mental health support to conflict resolution. Emma's music career blossomed. Her compositions, born from her family's journey, resonated with people around the world. She used her platform to advocate for mental health awareness and support for non-traditional families. Christopher grew into a compassionate, curious young boy, equally at home discussing coding with Ethan, playing violin with Emma, or helping Maria in the kitchen. He was the living embodiment of the family's resilience and love. And Maria, the heart of the family, continued to guide them with her wisdom, her love, and her unwavering belief in the power of compassion to transform lives. The search for Vivian eventually came to an end. She was found living quietly in a small town, having sought help for her mental health issues. The reunion was emotional and complex, filled with tears, apologies, and cautious hope. While Vivian could never undo the pain she had caused, she was given the opportunity to build a new relationship with her children and to find her own path to healing. As for the public perception of the Blackwoods, it gradually shifted. What had once been seen as a scandalous fall from grace became a story of redemption, resilience, and the redefinition of family and success. The family's journey inspired others to reassess their own priorities and to recognize the true sources of wealth in their lives. On a warm summer evening, 5 years to the day since Maria had first become officially part of the family, they all gathered in the garden for a celebration. The mansion, once a cold symbol of status, had been transformed into a warm, welcoming home. The perfectly manicured lawns had given way to a wild, beautiful garden where Christopher loved to play and explore. They sat around a table laden with food, sharing stories and laughter. Jonathan raised his glass for a toast. "To family," he said, his eyes shining with emotion. "Not the family we were born into, but the family we chose. The family we built together, through love, understanding, and second chances." "To family," they all echoed, their glasses clinking in the golden light of the setting sun. As night fell and stars began to twinkle in the sky, Maria looked around at the faces of her loved ones. She thought about the long, winding path that had brought them all to this moment. The pain, the struggles, the moments of despair, and the love, the growth, the joy that had come from it all. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of her family, Maria knew that they had discovered the truest form of wealth. It wasn't measured in dollars or stock options, in mansions or luxury cars. It was measured in the strength of their bonds, in the depth of their love, in their capacity for forgiveness and growth. The story of the rich family and their mate had become so much more than anyone could have imagined. It had become a testament to the transformative power of compassion, the strength found in vulnerability, and the true meaning of family. As the night wore on and the celebration continued, Maria silently renewed the vow she had made all those years ago. She would continue to stand by this family, to love them, to guide them, not as a maid, not as an employee, but as an integral part of a unit bound by something far stronger than blood: the choice to love, to forgive, and to grow together. The Blackwood family's journey was far from over. There would be new challenges to face, new joys to celebrate, new lessons to learn. But whatever the future held, they would face it as they had faced everything else, together, with open hearts and the unshakable knowledge that they were rich beyond measure in the things that truly mattered. As the last of the party lights were turned off and the family made their way back into the house, Maria lingered for a moment in the garden. She looked up at the star-studded sky, feeling a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. From a maid in a foreign land to the heart of a family that had redefined wealth and success, her journey had been extraordinary. But Maria knew that the real magic lay not in the dramatic twists of fate, but in the small, everyday moments of love and connection that had brought them all to this point. With a soft smile, Maria turned and walked into the house, closing the door gently behind her. The Blackwood mansion stood quiet under the starry sky, no longer a symbol of material excess, but a testament to the power of love to transform lives and redefine the very meaning of being rich. And so, the story of the rich family and their maid came to a close. Or perhaps, more accurately, it opened a new chapter. For in the end, they had all discovered that true wealth lay not in what they possessed, but in who they had become together.